John F. Kennedy International Airport was, as always, a crossroads of hurried travelers, families setting off on vacations, and business professionals chasing new opportunities. The clock read 2:30 p.m., and Flight 748 to Los Angeles was boarding soon. In the bustling terminal, Amelia Carter stood out with her poised elegance. A black woman in her mid-30s, she exuded confidence in a tailored navy blue suit that hugged her form just right. Her heels were practical yet refined, her gold wristwatch discreet but expensive. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek bun, accentuating her sharp yet warm features. Seated near gate 23A, she scrolled through a report on her tablet, her eyes scanning the text with unwavering focus. The announcement came over the speakers. First-class passengers for Flight 748 to Los Angeles, please proceed to boarding. Around her, a handful of travelers rose to their feet. Amelia closed her tablet, adjusted the strap of her leather carry-on, and joined the line. Behind her, a man in a gray suit glanced frequently at his phone, his fingers tapping impatiently against the screen. A well-dressed older couple chatted quietly about their upcoming stay in California. Walking through the jet bridge, Amelia took a moment to observe the aircraft. A Boeing 787 Dreamliner, sleek and modern, promising luxury and comfort for those in first class. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by the subdued elegance of the cabin, plush cream-colored seats, soft ambient lighting, and the faint scent of polished wood and fresh linen. Standing near the entrance was Emily Whitmore, the head flight attendant, a tall, blonde woman whose smile was carefully rehearsed. Her uniform was immaculate, and her demeanor exuded the effortless charm expected of someone in her position. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Lawton," she greeted an older businessman with warmth. "Your seat is 1A, by the window. So good to have you back with us." "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds," she beamed at the older couple. "I hope you had a wonderful stay in New York. Let me know if you need anything at all." Amelia waited her turn, noting how Emily's enthusiasm shifted depending on the passenger. When their eyes finally met, something in the flight attendant's expression changed. The warmth dimmed ever so slightly. "Your boarding pass, please?" Emily's voice was polite but noticeably more reserved. Without hesitation, Amelia handed over her ticket. Emily barely glanced at it before nodding. "Seat 2B. Enjoy your flight." And just like that, she turned away, immediately offering a bright, welcoming smile to the next passenger. Amelia noticed the subtle difference but said nothing. She had encountered this thinly veiled coldness too many times before to let it bother her. With a composed expression, she moved down the aisle and found her seat. Sliding her bag into the compartment beneath her seat, she settled in and took a deep breath. The cabin buzzed with quiet conversations and clinking glasses, as a steward moved gracefully between rows, pouring champagne for a couple already engaged in an animated discussion. As more passengers took their seats, the final preparations for takeoff were underway. To everyone on board, this was just another routine flight. But before the wheels even left the ground, Amelia would soon realize this was anything but ordinary. Amelia adjusted her seat, feeling the plush leather beneath her fingertips. First class on a Boeing 787 Dreamliner was designed for comfort, and every detail exuded sophistication, from the wide reclining seats to the personal entertainment screens seamlessly built into the cabin's elegant structure. A flight attendant in a crisp navy blue uniform approached with a warm but practiced smile. "Would you like a glass of champagne before takeoff, Ms. Carter?" Amelia glanced up and nodded politely. "Yes, please." The stewardess poured the golden effervescent liquid into a delicate glass, setting it gently on Amelia's fold-out tray table. She turned to the passenger beside Amelia, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, dressed in an expensive charcoal gray suit. He declined the drink with a small shake of his head and returned to scrolling through his phone, his Rolex catching the ambient cabin light. Amelia took a sip of her champagne, savoring the crisp taste as she looked around. A few rows ahead, an elderly couple was laughing softly while sharing an inside joke. Across the aisle, a young woman in a designer dress was already flipping through the luxury in-flight magazine, circling potential high-end shopping stops in Los Angeles. Everything was smooth, serene, and perfectly curated for a luxury travel experience. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, signaling that takeoff was near. Amelia fastened her seatbelt, watching as the flight attendants made their final rounds. The captain's voice soon came over the speakers, his tone steady and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 748 to Los Angeles. We are expecting a smooth journey today, with an estimated flight time of 5 hours and 30 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." The aircraft began its slow, powerful taxi down the runway. Amelia felt the familiar rush of acceleration, the slight pressure against her seat as the plane gained speed, then liftoff. The city below grew smaller, fading into a mosaic of twinkling lights as they ascended into the sky. Once they reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign switched off, and the flight attendants moved effortlessly through the cabin, catering to the elite passengers' needs. A refined voice interrupted Amelia's thoughts. "First time flying first class?" She turned to see the man beside her, who had finally put his phone away. He had a relaxed yet sharp demeanor, the kind of confidence that came with wealth and experience. Amelia smirked slightly. "Not quite. But I don't fly this route often." He nodded approvingly. "Ah. Well, you've picked the right way to travel. Nothing beats a luxury flight. I'm James, by the way. James Caldwell." She shook his offered hand briefly. "Amelia Carter. Pleasure." He studied her with quiet curiosity before leaning back in his seat. "Heading to LA for business or pleasure?" Amelia hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Business." James chuckled knowingly. "I figured. You have that look. Focused, efficient. Let me guess, finance? Law? Tech?" She smiled but didn't answer directly. "Something like that." He didn't push further, simply nodding. "Smart. Never reveal too much on a flight. You never know who's listening." The conversation paused as a flight attendant approached with a silver tray, offering a selection of gourmet appetizers, caviar, smoked salmon, truffle-infused hors d'oeuvres. Amelia selected a small dish, thanking the stewardess before turning back toward the window. Outside, the clouds stretched endlessly, illuminated by the fading golden glow of the setting sun. It was a scene of pure tranquility, a moment of calm before the unknown. Because what Amelia didn't know yet was that this journey of luxury would soon take an unexpected turn, one that would change everything. "Let me know if you want more suspense or details." Smiling face with smiling eyes. Vous avez dit. Chapter 3, Un mise cause inevitable. ChatGPT a dit. Chapter 3, An inevitable accusation. Amelia woke to the gentle hum of the aircraft, her mind still caught in the haze of light sleep. The cabin was dimly lit, with only the soft glow of reading lights illuminating scattered passengers lost in books, movies, or quiet conversations. She glanced at her watch, 2 hours until landing. She stretched slightly, feeling the comforting embrace of the luxurious leather seat, before reaching for the glass of water beside her. Then, she noticed something strange. Across the aisle, 2 flight attendants stood near the cockpit, whispering in low, urgent tones. One of them, the same woman who had served her champagne earlier, looked tense. The other, a tall man with a rigid posture, was stealing glances toward the first-class cabin, his eyes briefly locking onto hers before shifting away. A faint unease settled in her stomach. Before she could analyze it further, a calm but authoritative voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We ask that all passengers remain seated for the remainder of the flight. Our crew will be conducting a brief security check. Thank you for your cooperation." A security check? At 40,000 feet? That was unusual. Then, just as she processed that thought, she saw them, 2 uniformed air marshals making their way down the first-class aisle. Their expressions were serious, their movements deliberate. And they were headed straight for her. Amelia's pulse quickened. Stay calm, don't react. She had dealt with tense situations before, but this was different. She was trapped. The taller of the 2 marshals, a broad-shouldered man with sharp features, stopped beside her seat and spoke in a low but firm tone. "Miss Carter, we need you to come with us." The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, pretending not to watch but unable to ignore the scene unfolding before them. She kept her expression neutral. "May I ask what this is about?" The second marshal, a woman with piercing green eyes, pulled a badge from her jacket. "We have reason to believe you're involved in an ongoing investigation. We need to ask you some questions." James, the man seated next to her, raised an eyebrow, watching the exchange with veiled curiosity. Amelia exhaled slowly, weighing her options. She could refuse. But that would only escalate things. With a practiced, composed nod, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. "Lead the way." The marshals guided her toward the restricted crew section, past the flight attendants who were now pointedly avoiding her gaze. The tension was thick, pressing against her from all sides. As the door to the private interrogation space closed behind her, she finally allowed herself to feel it, the sinking certainty that this was far more than a routine questioning. This was a setup. And she was the prime suspect. The room was small, sterile, and uncomfortably cold. The faint hum of the aircraft's engines was the only sound filling the tense silence. Amelia sat in the narrow metal chair, her back straight, her face composed. Across from her, the two air marshals studied her with calculating expressions. The woman with the piercing green eyes, who had introduced herself as Agent Collins, placed a slim folder on the table between them. She didn't open it. Not yet. The male marshal, Agent Torres, leaned forward. "Miss Carter, do you know why you're here?" Amelia crossed her legs, feigning indifference. "I assume this is about something more serious than a missing luggage claim." Neither of them reacted to her attempt at humor. Bad sign. Collins finally opened the folder, revealing a single photograph. She slid it toward Amelia. Amelia glanced down, and her stomach tightened. It was a security camera image, slightly grainy but unmistakable. A person in a dark coat and hat, their face partially obscured by the shadows, was seen walking through a luxury boutique in the airport. In their left hand, a leather briefcase. A briefcase identical to the one James had carried onto the plane. Collins tapped the photo. This was taken an hour before departure. "Does this person look familiar to you?" Amelia kept her expression neutral. She could deny everything, claim ignorance. But lying outright to federal agents at 40,000 feet wasn't the best strategy. So instead, she stalled. "That's a very vague image. Could be anyone." Torres leaned in, his voice low but firm. "We know it's James Parker. And we know you were with him." Amelia didn't blink. "James and I sat next to each other on the flight." "That's hardly a crime." Collins exhaled sharply. "The briefcase he was carrying? It contains highly classified corporate documents. Documents that were stolen from a private research facility in Geneva." Amelia's mind raced. James was carrying stolen information? That was impossible. She had met him by chance, or at least, she had thought she had. But then, flashes of their conversation replayed in her mind. His vague answers. His reluctance to talk about work. The way he had held onto that briefcase the entire time, even when settling into his seat. Had she been played? Torres watched her closely. "We believe you're involved. And unless you start talking, this won't end well for you." For the first time, uncertainty crept in. Not because she was guilty, but because she realized just how dangerous this situation was. She was being framed. And the real question wasn't whether she could prove her innocence. It was whether she could get out of this before it was too late. The interrogation room felt even smaller now, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Amelia knew she had to tread carefully, one wrong word could seal her fate. Agent Collins and Agent Torres exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Then, Collins leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "You're protecting him." "Why?" Amelia let out a short laugh, though her pulse pounded in her ears. "Protecting him? I barely know the guy. We talked on the flight, that's all." Torres tapped the photograph again. "And yet, here you are." involved in an international theft investigation. Amelia exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay calm. Think, Amelia. Think. She had always been good at reading people. It was a skill she had honed over years of working in high-pressure environments. She could tell Collins was the one to worry about, relentless, focused, and convinced of her guilt. Torres, on the other hand, seemed more interested in the facts. He wasn't as sure. That was her opening. She turned to Torres, choosing her words carefully. Agent, let's assume for a second that James Parker is guilty. That doesn't explain why I'm sitting here, does it? If I was part of his plan, why would I still be on this plane instead of disappearing the moment we landed? Torres hesitated. Just for a second. Collins wasn't as easy to sway. She folded her arms. Maybe you got sloppy. Maybe Parker played you. Or maybe you're smarter than you let on, and this is all just an act. Amelia felt a spark of anger rise. She wasn't going to be anyone's scapegoat. Or maybe, she countered, leaning forward, you're wasting time on me while the real criminal is getting away. Silence. Then, a knock at the door. A junior officer stepped in, whispering something to Collins. Whatever it was, it made her frown. She turned back to Amelia, studying her like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Looks like we'll be continuing this conversation soon. Don't go anywhere. As the agents left, Amelia finally allowed herself to breathe. Whatever just happened outside that room, it had changed something. And if she wanted to get out of this unscathed, she needed to figure out exactly what before it was too late.